Casting for Fun podcast, the show that talks about entertainment, sports, music, and inspirational stories for all to enjoy. We're glad that you could join us today. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Now, here is your host, Albert Pineda.
Welcome, everybody, to the Casting for Fun podcast. I am your host, Albert Pineda, and this week's episode is for Wednesday, December 20th, 2023, the 101st episode of the show. And on this week's episode, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King's release, which was first released on December 17th. 2003, so it'll be a few days after technically the day that it was actually released. But to commemorate this awesome milestone, my good buddy, frequent collaborator, good friend of the show, Eddie Ramirez returns, and we talk about all things Lord of the Rings, specifically focusing on the Return of the King movie. I absolutely love this movie. In fact, it may be, if I were to put together a top 5 movie list of all time, I think this one would rank on there for sure. This movie is fantastic. It's great. I really wanted to give it a really polished feel, so I went ahead and included audio clips from the movie. So I think you can really immerse yourself into this episode of the podcast. Really feel like you're watching it. Of course, there's no substitution for actually watching the movie altogether. So I definitely recommend that this holiday season, watch all the Lord of the Rings movies, especially Return of the King, and you will not be disappointed. Okay, so Merry Christmas to all the listeners. This is going to be the last episode for 2023. So the following week, I'll be taking the week off, just enjoying family time for Christmas. But then coming on January 3rd of 2024, the show will return with more episodes, new episodes coming in 2024. So I'm looking forward to that. In the meantime, this is the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, with good friend and frequent collaborator, Eddie Ramirez. So joining me tonight for this episode of the show, episode 101, it's Eddie Ramirez, good friend of the show. Eddie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for bringing back. Happy to be back. And you are now beyond the 100 episodes. So I'm really excited to be part of the next half of the century mark.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for coming on and for being such a gracious guest. It's been really cool to geek out with you about anything and everything. And it's cool that, we've gone to talk extensively about Marvel, DC, Star Wars. One topic that we haven't really touched on significantly is Lord of the Rings. So today is a perfect day to actually sit down and talk about Lord of the Rings, particularly the Return of the King.
Oh, dude, I'm more than excited. So just bring it on, man.
Very nice.
I'm about the little people and the big.
So it is really cool that it's celebrating its 20th anniversary. 20 years ago today, on December 17th, 2003, it was released in theaters. And yeah, I think the movie going experience is still cool. We've had lots of great movies since, but at the same time, it hasn't quite been as special, right? Like the anticipation for each Lord of the Rings movie as we waited in those early 2000 years.
Yeah, I mean, especially after Fellowship, like just to see that it got done as close to the book as maybe you can get was like, whoa, no way. And then it just kind of just cascaded onto the next and the next. And those director's cuts as those re-releases were happening, it was just like, give me more. Let's go back to the world. So, it's been great, even with the latest Amazon stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So Return of the King, do you remember your experience 20 years ago pretty vividly? I mean, it's been great that you've been a frequent guest on the show. And so it's cool that 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, you got to share the experience of being at Disneyland for the premiere of Pirates of the Caribbean, which is great that it was the same year. So do you remember a couple months later, after seeing Pirates, you got to see Return of the King, and what was your experience like?
Honestly, like I just remember being just so stoked, trying to get as much sleep the night before because we were ready to do like the whole like midnight showing the next day. It was like a really big deal because my first book I ever read was The Hobbit, like the kid version of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And then I remember I went into the actual like adult version, like the I guess like the regular format of it. And then I remember my brother always had the Lord of the Rings trilogy books, but I never really knew that he had it because until I read The Hobbit because I didn't recognize the Tolkien, like book cover symbols and like the art with that. And then I remember like reading the first two books of that trilogy and then going to that third one, I was just like, oh my god, like this event, like it was a world building on the first one, a little bit of slow start, and then it just kept going, and then just to finally see that or anything close to that into the movies was great. I mean, I was just excited to see how they were going to close out the trilogy in their own take of it, and man, I remember I saw that movie probably like 6 times in theaters, like in the first week.
Oh wow.
Like I was obsessed.
Mhm.
Like hours were lost, homework was not done. It was great. I really do remember having such a good time with that movie. Just everything about it. I just the visual that it was actually happening, and then from beginning to end. I mean, dude, there was some teardroppers in that one.
Oh, there absolutely were, and we're definitely going to get to that. So stay tuned
Yeah.
for all
Oh gosh.
this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree, Eddie. I mean, it was such a visually compelling movie to watch. Like you just couldn't take your eyes off of it. Like I remember one time, this isn't tied directly to Return of the King. It's actually more towards Fellowship. But when Fellowship was released on DVD, so this would have been in 2002. So the anticipation's high for
Right.
the Two Towers. I'm at a random like Sam's Club. And I'm in the TV section, and they had it playing, and then all of a sudden, it's at the scene when they're going for the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and the Balrog is about to appear, but then like all of a sudden, like I'm standing there watching it on a TV on display at Sam's Club, and then like swarms of people just gather around. We got like 20 people in the middle of the store just watching
Oh, that's
the
awesome.
movie. It was just a cool experience, and like as soon as spoilers again, massive spoilers for Return of the King, but and all Lord of the Rings, but when Gandalf like has the iconic line of "Fly, you fools," I think everybody kind of
Oh
just
yeah.
dispersed from that part, but I think if we had time, if we weren't there shopping, probably people would have stayed for the rest of the movie.
Oh gosh. I mean, yeah. I was just picturing like that moment you were having. I'm like, I believe it because it's not like now where you just have just oh, I want to see something, go watch a YouTube clip, or you have your streaming platforms and things like that. Like it was either you had the DVD or Blu-ray or you didn't.
Yeah,
Did you have the right soundtrack for the more modern movies? The TV, like the whole setup was much more like catered to movies and kind of few and far between. So if you didn't have like that colorful TV, like it kind of hurt watching it, knowing that you could have something way better. And I used to do the same thing at like Targets. Like I'd be there, I'd go straight to electronic department to see what movie it was playing. And sometimes you just catch a quick 15-minute movie or something. So man, that's awesome that you have that.
yeah.
So
One other cool aspect to consider for the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy is that yes,
yeah,
the fans absolutely loved it, but what's kind of an interesting and amazing, I think, is that the critics loved it, and the Hollywood elites loved it so much so that that it was like Oscar buzz, which is like unheard of for like fantasy type movies like that.
yeah,
But yeah, so a couple of stats I wanted to bring up, an interesting facts about Return of the King. So it's interesting to note that it has the record for the most Oscar wins at 11, tied with the original Ben-Hur and Titanic. And to be honest, I don't think any other movie is going to come close to really catching that
I
record.
don't think so.
Like,
And we're almost that was all for Return of the King, right?
all for Return of the King. I
Yeah,
think if you go for like all three have won. I think it has the most for any franchise for three movies.
right. Yeah, I know. I remember they had a record like that. I'm just like never gonna be touched. Like
Yeah.
especially Return of the King. The way it ended was just such a big closer.
Oh,
It's really hard to close a trilogy.
yeah. And then another cool aspect about the movie is that it was the only the second movie in history to cross the $1 billion threshold after Titanic. And since then, there have been several movies to do it. But at the time, I remember it being a big deal that it was like, oh wow, it did $1 billion box office. That's
Oh
pretty
yeah,
much an achievement for that.
yeah. No, I mean that we've never seen a grander scope up until that point, like that was like the view of just the battle, or a regular mountain range just looks so massive.
Yeah.
So
Oh, very cool, man. So what I wanted to do is, again, like we normally do for movies, is to kind of like just share random interesting facts about the movie, reminisce about favorite scenes, things of that nature. But I want to try and do something kind of interesting and cool that I'm kind of been incorporating into the podcast now, and that's actually using actual audio clips. I think it kind of gives it a more polished, more professional sound when people listen to it. So not just hearing Eddie and I talking about it, but you can actually hear some of what from clips from the movie. I think it'd actually be kind of cool for listeners to hear. And this ties into the first interesting story that I wanted to share. Eddie, are you familiar with Christopher Lee's story of getting stabbed in the back and how he had to kind of school Peter Jackson about that?
no.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in the extended
Oh,
version of
okay.
Return of the King, they kind of did a loose adaptation of what happens in the book, where Grima Wormtongue is like just tired of like being verbally assaulted and like
Right.
lambasted by Saruman, so that he actually stabs him in the back. You know what? I think Christopher Lee will explain it better. So we're gonna try something really cool here on the show. We're gonna go ahead and do insert the audio clip right now. So let me do that.
All right, Christopher Lee, tell me how that went down.
When Wormtongue rises up and comes up behind Saruman to stab him, of course it was my job as director to talk to Christopher Lee and to explain to him what I wanted. So I started to go into this long explanation about what sort of sound he should make when he got stabbed.
I seem to recall that I did say to Peter, have you any idea of what kind of noise happens when somebody is stabbed in the back? And I said, well, because I do.
It's not.
Like that. It's because the breath's driven out of your body.
He proceeded to sort of talk about some very clandestine part of World War II.
He used to be in the British Secret Service, whatever they were called, the OSS.
He seemed to have expert knowledge of exactly the sort of noise that they make, and so I just sort of didn't push the subject any further. I just said, well, you obviously know what to do, Christopher, so I'm sure you'll do it great, and he did.
Very cool. So there you have it, man. It's kind of crazy to think that. So I knew that Christopher Lee had served in the British Secret Service, had been, actually hunted down Nazis back then during World War II. But it's kind of crazy to think that, when he's telling Peter Jackson, hey, I mean, this is not what people sound like when they get stabbed. They sound more like this. So it leads me to think that either Christopher Lee's been stabbed himself or he killed himself that way.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, oh my gosh.
But, yeah, so
I like what Peter Jackson said too. He's like, you don't have to go any further. You can just I'll let you lead that one.
So yeah,
oh man.
It's an interesting story to consider and think about.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Were there any that stood out to you as far as like really, really cool stories or interesting facts? I mean, I have a couple more that I want to share.
Go for the next one. You just threw one out of left field. I was not expecting that one. That was really cool.
Oh, okay. Sounds good, man. Sounds good. So another one that I wanted to share, I mean, there'll be more audio clips for the listeners coming in. So you please keep in mind for that, or stay tuned for that. But according to the website, factinate.com, I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate. I do like the story. If it's cool, if it's accurate, cool. But apparently Peter Jackson had given Elijah Wood and Andy Serkis One Ring duplicates, or that were used in the movie, but didn't tell the other. So Elijah Wood, I guess, thought that he came away with the One Ring. Andy Serkis thought that he did. And yeah, I know when movies wrap up and actors usually take home a prop and they'll give them to them by the director. That's actually a really cool fitting one for both of them to have. And I would imagine that old Bilbo actor, so Ian Holm, before he died, he probably got one as well, and maybe even young Bilbo from the Hobbit series. So I'm trying to blink on his name. Martin Freeman. Yeah, I think he probably got one as well. So
I throw out his character name from like Black Widow and Marvel. And
yeah. So is there a prop that you would love to take home, Eddie, if you got a chance to, from anything from the Lord of the Rings trilogy?
I mean, I don't know. After shout out to Tom Bombadil, he just tossed that away. It wasn't that important.
Yeah.
let's see. I don't know, man. I would have just I definitely would have gone to right before the I don't know if I would get the sword that was reforged or the when it was in broken pieces. I
Oh,
feel
that's
it.
really cool. Yeah.
I feel like just both versions of it have like really good symbols
Hmm.
like that, or I'll probably go with uh oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of the necklace that Bilbo had to show him the light. You know the gift that received by the Elf Queen.
Oh yeah. Oh, Frodo rather.
Oh, Frodo, right. And it had a name for it. I'm sorry, nerds.
Sorry, I guess
But
expressing our nerd credits. I know exactly what you're
yeah,
talking
my
about,
my
but
my
I
nerd
don't
card
remember off the top of my head.
is not gonna get renewed. But yeah,
Elendil, I
I'm
think.
brain farting on it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm not
Elendil.
even gonna guess because I'm gonna murder myself more. But yeah, I would definitely probably have that one just because there's just so much behind that, and most of the book he was holding on to that until it was like really needed with Sam and so on. So
Mhm.
probably that one would probably be like a dark horse for me to take home.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's actually sounds perfect. I probably would go for the sword myself, both either the broken version or the reforged version. But
Yeah.
you can't go wrong. In fact, I think Peter, I'm sorry, Ian McKellen ended up like taking Gandalf's staff, and I guess he has it on display at his home. So
Oh,
something,
that is awesome. I
yeah.
mean, just seeing that is fantastic. I mean,
Yeah. But an interesting story about that. So John Rhys Davies, who plays Gimli, I mean, it's pretty well known, but he's actually the tallest member of the Fellowship. So he would just wear the prosthetic makeup to look like Gimli. And then most of the wide angle shots were done with the body double to make him appear like he's short. But apparently he really hated wearing the prosthetic makeup. So instead of taking home a prop, what he told the filmmakers was that, hey, I want to burn my prosthetics. I want this like done with. So he actually got to like physically destroy the prosthetics that he had to wear to play Gimli.
dang.
That's a funny story. I always,
Let quick side question with Gimli.
yeah.
I I know like they kind of talk about it in the book, but or in the books, but man, did you ever like wonder when you were watching the movie, like how is he keeping up with this elf and human running around the country? Like I
Yeah.
always took the shot where he was like always within 7 feet. I don't know about
No,
that.
that's a good point. Like you think back to the Two Towers when like they're chasing after the Urukai to try and save Merry and Pippin.
Right.
They would always show Gimli like lagging behind a little bit, but still able to keep up. So
Yeah, I always like there should be some carrying.
yeah,
You gotta give me one shot
yeah.
of them carrying.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. So another cool scene I thought was obviously the end sequence, the Black Gate, where they all march on, and Aragorn has an impassioned speech to both the Rohirrim and the people of the soldiers of Gondor
Yeah.
to fight this day we fight. It's a really cool speech, but apparently in that desert area, New Zealand, that's where like the New Zealand army had trained the training, and there had been like old landmines that hadn't detonated. So they had to get like an actual crew in to make sure that everything was safe and secure. But for me, as like if I'm there as an extra, like thinking, oh crap, there's like a landmine that could go off. Like hopefully this thing gets taken care of. So
Yeah, dude. I was thinking, okay, so I do remember one thing. I'm not sure if this is for Return of the King or it was probably for Lord of the Rings Fellowship when it first opened. Was I remember Ian McKellen said that he and Elijah Wood actually never filmed most of their scenes together, like at all, because they had to do the sizing of the graphics.
oh
So
yeah,
one would step in, do the role, and then they keep the shot, the angle, and then they have the other one actually step in on another day of shooting or something to actually do their part. So I always thought that was like pretty interesting, just kind of a little behind the scenes thing where like, oh, they were never actually really together, but yet a lot of the chemistry was actually pretty good.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, and speaking of chemistry, so I'm glad you brought that up because it's another point that I wanted to bring up. So, screenwriter for the entire trilogy, Philippa Boyens, she would actually spend a lot of time with the cast, and apparently, so she was just at a karaoke bar with the cast members and heard Billy Boy singing, and like she thought like, oh, he's got a great voice. We should really implement this more. So it was kind of interesting that Billy Boyd, who's cast as Pippin in the movies, turns out he does have like a really great singing voice, which would be necessary to really incorporate some of the elements from the books. So the songs that he sings. So a couple things about that. So first and foremost, like I heard so many stories of like all the cast members just partying and having fun and really bonding as a like a family, which is really cool to hear about. Like that the four hobbits would go surfing together. They do things like go to a karaoke bar and they're singing karaoke, things of that nature. So for me, it just seemed like that would have been a really cool job to have. Just like for a full year, you're living in New Zealand and you're just like bunning around and having like the time of your life with like these great people.
Yeah, like I remember when I was watching like the the documentaries of like the movies, like the creating of the rings. But I think it was called something like that for the documentary. I remember that was like a big deal because they would all they all relocated out there. So for months at a time for most of the cast, especially everyone behind the scenes, because they're obviously building new sets, costumes, and so on. That it was like a huge nucleus of people just knowing each other. Like that was their family for months at a time. Especially like because in New Zealand, like I remember one of the behind the scene like artists was saying like because the high winds were so strong that a lot of the towns that they were making would get literally blown down, and they had to like literally rebuild up until the moment of do the recording and then be done. But then afterwards, they basically created little mini towns where they would just all go out, hang out at these little towns and just getting to know each other and stuff like that. So it was like really cool to like see like the artistry like of it of through bonding time, like they actually got to really get to know cast members and just almost invent brand new ways to kind of do scenes with the scale that they were trying to go for. It was really cool to see like that documentary.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree, Eddie. And then speaking of like, the artistry that goes into it. So I want to show another clip or play, I guess for those listening, you're going to be hearing a clip of maybe one of my favorite scenes from the whole movie. It's just a beautifully tragic scene. So for those who don't know, so Billy Boyd is, because of his singing chops, as Pippin, he's singing a song for Denethor. And this actually happens in the book, like the specific song that he sings, that about like, it kind of leads into the scene that we're seeing, because Denethor was just a complete jerk to his son Faramir, just totally downing him that you're not as good as your brother, you'll never be as good as him, like. And then just the Faramir and the other Gondor soldiers trying to take back the city Osgiliath, I think, that was taken. And then so the whole scene just plays out beautifully done with Billy Boyd singing, the imagery, and then just even little subtle things like Denethor just chomping on like grapes or tomatoes and like the juice coming out to signify like the blood that these guys have just been massacred in this like beautifully tragic scene. So again, it's not going to do it justice for those who aren't visually seeing it, but I do want to kind of play the audio so you can actually get a taste of that song and that how that emotional that scene was.
Can you sing, Master Hobbit?
Well, yes. At least, well enough for my own people. But we have no songs for great halls and evil times.
And why should your songs be unfit for my halls? Come, sing me a song.
Oh, miss behind the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread, through shadow to the edge of night, until the stars are all alight. Mist and shadow, cloud and shade, all shall fade, all
Perfect, man. So you know what? It's scenes like that that really show why these movies were all like Oscar caliber rate movies. Just it has the action, it has the humor, but then you have like really dramatic, like intense scenes like that. So it was just beautifully, perfectly done. I mean, again, preaching to the choir. I'm sure everybody listening knows how awesome the Lord of the Rings movies are, but again, it's as we're honoring it for its 20th anniversary. I think just going back and reflecting on scenes like that, it's just really, really meaningful for all of us as fans, I feel.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about like this trilogy is that the fellowship was broken very early on into the movie. It just the way it just worked out, and just to still be able to follow a lot of the characters and just see their growth and where they end up and what kind of resolutions each of them had to kind of represent, whether if it was their past was through sacrifice, loyalty, love. There's so many, like, everyone kind of had like their own theme. um I do like how they were able to bring that all together and affect other characters that were part of that fellowship group. So, like, even Gandalf, so many times throughout the trilogy, there was always that glimmer of hope because he still believed that Frodo and Sam were still out there. So that was always like his faith in something like beyond like the tangibles of the moment or whatever. And that's the same thing with like the other hobbits too. Like, you had one that always felt he wasn't good enough, the other one felt like he was so brash, and then it was like they kind of come full circle in the end about what the real meaning is, like what is really war about, things like that. So it's definitely beautiful that they included like these different sides of the same character. It's not just, oh, this is the annoying one. Oh, this is the one that's always unsure of himself. Like, no, they actually weren't just two full characters. Like, they were actually very complex.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. And again, it's just another testament to how amazing Peter Jackson and his team were in putting together these movies. And on the subject of Peter Jackson and like, the craft that he did for the movie, a concept or basically an interesting fact from the movie that I found was interesting. And it kind of has application in today's filmmaking too, is the fact that allegedly Peter Jackson didn't like the concept or the idea of the Army of the Dead. Basically, so the army that comes in to help the Gondor win the battle of Minas Tirith
Yeah.
to save everybody. So I guess I don't know, he didn't specific, according to the articles I read, it didn't specifically state why he didn't like it. I guess if you look at it from a battle sequence standpoint, like it's kind of like it's too easy because the army of the dead, the ghosts can just easily wipe everyone out. And then it was never really kind of explained that Isildur had magic powers to control people, so that they were bound to have to follow Isildur's heir. So I can understand maybe reservations about that particular sequence, but he used it nonetheless.
Right.
And the reason that was stated that he would use it was to actually appeal to the fans and basically make sure that, yes, I'm going to take certain liberties with the movie. Like, Eddie, as you had mentioned, Tom Bombadil's cut out altogether. But the fact that that particular sequence, he said, no, I can't take it out. I have to make sure that the fans are happy. It's a really cool aspect or thing to consider from the filmmaking standpoint, because we have someone like Peter Jackson who I think he cherishes the fans and he honors and respects the fans and says, hey, I'm gonna make some changes, but I want to make sure that the fans are happy, and that's why I'm going to include this particular concept even if he's not particularly a fan of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think from a creative point of view, I think this kind of speaks to, depending on the director's approach to like movies, like they always want to try to keep it grounded, a little realistic, relatable. So having that aspect of the movie from the book does kind of make it more fantasy now. If you kind of compare it to like most of what he had shot up until that point. So yes, we see orcs, but they are humanoids, they are, it's a little more believable in the sense to kind of get captured in that. But once you start putting ghosts and flying around, it is kind of a harder sell, I guess, in that way. So I can see that, but it's so essential from the book. It's part of, Aragon's growth as, becoming king and what that meant. I mean, hey, we didn't get a talking pony, so like there are little things along the way that they maybe they included the character or a visual of certain things from the book, but they didn't give them maybe magical powers like Aragon was supposed to have. There were things that they excluded to kind of keep it grounded. Because and then you kind of you I think then what would happen is like the audience will start questioning that and not focus on the story too much.
Yeah.
And so I can see maybe the reservations he probably had on that, but for sure, I'm glad they had it. I remember one of my friends, he was like, "Oh, why didn't they just have the ghost from the beginning?" And I'm like, and I bring that up for this conversation because I'm sure people that were just casual fans, just watching the movies that read the books, that's what they would say, and I think that's what he was probably worried about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But for those again who followed it very closely and knew what was going on, you would, I guess, understand or at least know from at least what we get with the movie that it was only when they saw the reforged sword.
Right.
That, hey,
Right.
this guy is in fact the heir of Isildur. We have to listen
Mhm.
to him, kind of thing. So, and then everything that took to get to that point where they have the scene earlier where Arwen explains to Elrod why they have to reforge the sword. I'm dying. There's nothing you can do to save me. Aragorn has to be king.
Yeah,
Kind of
exactly.
stuff. Yeah, it's all interesting. It's really cool, really cool. And then also, like I mentioned before, just that Peter Jackson actually cares for the fans. I mean, I don't want to mean this as a dig for other people. I can go into a whole tangent, I guess, or Nick he can go into a whole tangent.
Let's go there. Yeah,
But
but I think also kind of a nod to fans too. He even did say, I remember when the documentaries was, that's why he also did the extended cuts.
yeah,
That this was also a way outside of just because it's just too long of a movie to just throw out for the exposition that he was trying to show. Because you can only do so much. I mean, these books are so dense.
yeah.
It's like I did appreciate the extended cuts because it did add a little extra like, oh, I do remember that from the book. Oh, he did say that. So it was nice that those were added. I mean, remember the orcs when they leave oh my gosh. It's the living forest
Oh,
at the
Fangorn.
yes, thank you so much. When the orcs run in there, I mean they all get eaten up and beat, from the living forest. So it's like they added that kind of at the end
Mhm.
of uh Two Towers. So that was kind of nice. Like I was like, oh, they finally added, even though it was like a little distant shot, but
Yeah.
if you know kind of thing. So that
Mhm.
was nice that they added that.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And actually, what also I think is kind of cool about the doing it for the fans and getting the fans involved, which is a cool thing that a lot of filmmakers should look into, is that there was an open casting call in New Zealand to be part of the Rohirrim army. So the army that gets to ride in and like
Right.
save Gundor from the orcs who are invading. The only condition, what I read online, was that you actually had to know how to ride a horse. But if you did, you can actually get in there and hey, you're in the movie. If you can ride a horse and you're willing to show up. So that would have been pretty cool, I think. I mean, I don't know how to ride a horse, so I could never do it, but
But the fact that he was willing to kind of have that, especially to like New Zealand opened up their doors for
yeah.
them, like that was basically everyone's second home. And
Mhm.
so that was really cool that they were able to do that for a lot of the locals out there. I do remember they mentioned that oh my god, I have to look at the documentary name because I keep bringing it up as a reference. I just remember it off memory.
Uh-huh.
That they did bring that up as a thing, especially in the Rohirrim when they were doing the initial casting calls in the for the Twin Towers. Like they needed some extras because yes, there is CGI to add more to
Mhm.
every shot, but they always had like in every scene like an actual probably cast of 30, like the primary cast, and then extra like the extras would be like 20, sometimes 30 people just riding horses,
Mhm.
and they just dress them all up. I think that's really cool to just, hey, like I'm in the movie, but find me in the credits all the way down there.
Yeah, to do the combination of like practical effects combined with CGI, I think gives it a really cool, awesome feel and look to it. Whereas I mean, if it's too computerized, you can kind of tell. And I think it's like
Yeah,
certain complaints about that. So again, the care and effort they went into making these movies. Again, I'll just keep saying it, it's just fantastic and amazing.
honestly, though, I think the most impressive prosthetics I've ever seen came out of those Urukai, and like just the orcs in general. Whenever they would have, like shots of the orcs, even close-ups. Like, yes, we know they don't exist, but man, like they really did such a good job. Like, it didn't look cheesy to me.
Mhm.
Even the facial expressions whenever they would speak or maybe kind of frown or scold like a human, like it was so well done. So the design team of those three movies were fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I want to show two more clips about just how amazing the acting was from these movies, and just how emotional the impact of lines delivered and the visuals you're seeing. It's just a work of art watching these movies. So again, the two scenes that I want to share. The first, I think a lot of people will probably recognize. If you know me, you probably would know this is one of maybe my all-time favorite scenes in all of cinema. And get your tissue box ready, because this is actually a little bit of a tearjerker scene. It's the scene when Frodo and Sam are trying to make their last mount up to Mount Doom, and Frodo just gives up. I just can't do it anymore. And then Sam, being the absolute loyal best friend that he is, I mean, he's
We
the guy you
all
want
need
on
a
your side.
Sam in our lives. That's all I know.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me go ahead and play that clip for you here.
Do you remember the Shire, Mr. Furlong? It'll be spring soon. The orchards will be in blossom. And the birds will be nesting in the hazel thicket. And they'll be sowing the summer barley in the lower fields. And eating the first of the strawberries with cream. Do you remember the taste of strawberries?
No, Sam. I can't recall the taste of food. No, the sound of water. The touch of grass. I'm naked in the dark. There's nothing. No veil between me and the wheel of fire. I can see him with my waking eyes.
Then let us be rid of it. Once and for all. Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you. But I can carry you. Come on!
Such a good scene.
So there you go. I mean, no matter how many times I watch that scene,
Yeah.
I get just teary eyed. Just the most emotional, like inspirational thing you'll ever see, like in any movie. So
Yeah, okay, so here are the two for sure. If I'm in a quiet setting, I have time and not being rushed watching these movies, especially if I can cram all three in one day, which I've done plenty, is so Sam is responsible for making me cry twice. Like for sure. Like these are automatic, my annual crying moments. Is in Fellowship when he refuses to be left behind by Frodo, and then he'll swim. Frodo saves him from drowning, and then that whole scene right there, I got just turn on the waterworks. So that one, and then Frodo's goodbye at the end of Return of the King. So when they're at the bay, and then he does his goodbye. That scene with the group, and especially with Sam, that's like the cherry on top. That part gets me because you also have Bilbo there, and what Bilbo represents. To me, I think I also include because I read The Hobbit, so that little added inheritance of like emotions of that, what that book meant. So that goodbye is also like goodbye to the world for me. So whenever that hits, it's like, oh my God, we're leaving. And, they're all crying because they aren't going to see each other. And I'm crying because this movie is about to end in like 15 minutes. So, yeah, those are two strong scenes. That one being in Return of King for sure. So those are some good callback scenes. Like it just hits. Like it just does. when you appreciate the group and where the struggles they went through and all their resolves, like that goodbye scene is like everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Totally agree, Eddie. And then one more clip that I wanted to show. This one's also one of my favorites. It's with Aragorn being crowned as king, and we see the hobbits there, and everything comes full circle. Yeah, they're shirelings. They're like, nobody cares who hobbits are, to all of a sudden getting like the admiration and respect from like everyone in the kingdom of Gondor. So one more clip. Here we go.
My friends. You bow to no one.
Yeah, so just perfect. It's got all the feels, just like
Elijah Wood sells it, man.
Oh, he
That
does.
guy has the look for all those shots.
Mhm.
He sells those moments so well. He just has like this oh look when it with like he the way he expresses himself, it really sells it, man. Because Frodo really always has felt like out of place, It's just
Mhm.
and then in that moment, it's kind of like, you know, like how do I accept this? Still, you see it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then, for all these emotional scenes that we're talking about and sharing audio clips for here in the movie, I mean, don't forget to all the listeners. I mean, the action sequence you see here among like the best you'll ever see in any like Hollywood production. It's just so thrilling and exciting and sometimes even kind of gory. But again,
Yeah.
everything about the Lord of the Rings trilogy is just fantastic and great. And yeah, I mean, I especially love Return of the King. So just to get down and talk about it for its 20th anniversary, it's been such a blast for me, Eddie. That was kind of all the clips and talking points I had. Did you have anything else you'd like to share? I want to make sure you have plenty of time to share your favorite parts about the movie.
Oh, well, I kind of mentioned like the goodbye scene at the
Yeah.
end. That one to me, that was like a big one. I think from there, like I've always felt for Faramir. Faramir was I always felt bad for him. So like one of the scenes with him is obviously when he talks about Boromir and the relationship he had with him. I do wish they touched on it a little more because it was like that was such a big thing. Like because Boromir was a big deal, but he always loved his brother. So for Faramir to still feel that big daunting shadow of him, even as he got more focused in that book and the movie itself, like it was nice to finally see like Faramir find his happiness and just kind of like, all right, time to move forward, with that. So I think the biggest one was when he talks to when he just makes this kind of reveal like, hey, like I am Boromir's brother, to the two hobbits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was like a big thing because from there it was just kind of setting the tone of like, his path and what you're gonna start seeing in the rest of the movie and how he kind of has to like overcome like the worst abuse of a father can give, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is horrible, but so I'm glad he overcame that too. Those were like some biggies for me. Like I was so interested in that.
Oh, me too. Yeah. In fact, actually, I love that the extended version of the Return of the King
Yes.
incorporates the Houses of the Healing sequence.
Yes.
Because I mean, you watch the movies and that you kind of you feel bad for Faramir who kind of gets the shaft, but Eowyn kind of gets the shaft too. Like I mean, you're not Arwen, so Aragorn's not going to go for you. But
yeah,
to see her get her moment and then to see them kind of blossom and develop their relationships really cool. It is brief, so I can understand that. I mean, the main focus would be on Aragorn and Arwen.
Of course.
But it is kind of cool to get that sequence into the movie as well.
Yeah, I was really happy, especially like you said, perfect bring up is the extended cut, because when they did give him that little extra like few minutes just to kind of add some depth to the character, like that, those two brothers are such an interesting like setup. I really did like how they try to like portray them in the movies. And if it, especially if you really like I'm a big fan of Boromir, so to see like how Boromir kind of redeemed himself, and then for Faramir to finally get that closure about his brother, like, was really nice too.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome, man. Very cool. Very cool. Do you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I mean, honestly, like, I can really nerd out right now, but I know we're just doing the 20th celebration, and it deserves that recognition. I mean, this movie, uh, had a big effect. I mean, all three really. Like, if you're a fan of the books or just the movies, like, this had such a culture impact, like, on what movies can be on grand scale. So many movies since have tried to copy Lord of the Rings in some way, especially Return of the King. So just to see how its influence is still there to this day, and how it changed from grand scope to small scope of just exposition in movies, is impressive. And I mean, the only trilogy to me to this day, I mean, there's probably some other ones, but like Godfather's probably the only one where I can feel like you don't need a war or an action scene in every 5 minutes of the movie to just make a huge impact, and that's what this was. It was such a good building of a movie, and then whenever you'd have a scene that involves some swords and shields or whatever, like, there was so much more meaning behind it. So, for me, like, Return of the King was like such a, I think, as good as you can do to close out a trilogy. It's really impressive what they did.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then last thing I can remember hearing, I mean, I don't know if you heard this story as well, Eddie, but that they were going to be potentially developing fourth age stuff with Peter Jackson returning. Did you? I heard that once, but I haven't heard anything since. So I don't know if you know a little more about that.
No, honestly, outside of the what the show's trying to do, I haven't heard much beyond that. I just know that they had a little bit of a hiccup with the first season, and I know Amazon is really trying to like get it right on the second season. So that's all I was kind of like paying attention to. But other than that, like, no, I haven't really heard much.
Oh, okay, I think it's kind of one of those stories that just quietly was announced, and nothing's really been revealed since. So hopefully we get some information soon. But
Yeah,
my understanding is that they were gonna be working on fourth age material, potentially a new trilogy of movies with Peter Jackson and his team returning. Which again, even though I'll admit I understand there's faults with the Rings of Power, I personally enjoyed it. But having Peter Jackson and his team involved in some capacity, I think could actually make lots of people really, really happy. So, well, we'll see what the future holds for the Lord of the Rings franchise.
Yeah, I think I mean, I remember hearing something like that like way back, but then I thought maybe that's what the show is. I'm not, that's why I was like, I'm not sure, because maybe the show can make or break Middle Earth now. That's kind of like the good and bad about when you do like shows or like kind of like an offshoot movie in the same world, is that not so much trying to taint with the good, because you can always just go back and watch the good movies, but maybe whatever becomes of the show will kind of determine what Peter Jackson does, because now you have to kind of have some breathing room between what the show does and what you do back in Middle Earth, so that way people don't maybe like kind of mix it, thinking the general audience is like, oh, is that all the same stuff or not? So sometimes that can be an issue, like Star Wars or Marvel shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, all IPs have to deal with things of that nature. So it's but the good news
is Middle Earth for me, man. I nerd out on that stuff.
Yeah. The good news is that no matter what happens for the future, I mean, we always have these trilogy of movies. They're always going to be here. It's fantastic. It's going awesome to go back and rewatch it. In fact, all this being said, I think I want to go back and rewatch all three. So
no, they age like wine. Like, especially right now during the holidays. I think if you have time, I've always loved watching movies, like whether it's like old school Bond movies, or it's something about that. I remember growing up, the reruns would be playing on like TNT or something like that. where they would have Bond movies or even Lord of the Rings. They would play like these movies like on TV, and I just remember it was like such a nice pastime. So if they're available and you just, if you have the old 4Ks or if you just got it on your streaming platform, just watch those. You can't go wrong. They age so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was definitely no coincidence that all three of the Lord of the Rings movies and the three Hobbit movies were all released at Christmas time in their various years. So yeah, I mean, it's the perfect time to sit down and watch it with your family and enjoy the awesome entertainment that's available to us.
Definitely.
Very cool. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But yeah, for all the listeners, I mean, watch Return of the King, celebrate its 20th anniversary, and looking forward to many more cool episodes of the Casting for Fun podcast. So thank you, Eddie, for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And shout out to all the nerds. My nerd card is not going to be revoked. It's called the Evan Star necklace.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Very cool, man. Okay, thanks, Eddie. Okay, you've been listening to the Casting for Fun podcast. Thanks, everybody.